defense adjustments, meta nerfs, and new item effects. Hey guys, what's up? So here's a quick recap of the official server update. It's a big one, so we're gonna make it quick. First up, we have the defense adjustments. The developers believe that damage-oriented heroes should play the main role of dealing damage. But some heroes like Martis, Karrie, and Guinevere are able to use full defense builds effectively, and because of this, gave the tank heroes less value. To fix this, the developers lowered the defense stats of items. But in return, tank heroes gained more defense growth. So if a non-tank hero uses a full defense build, they will have lower defense compared before. But it has little difference for tanks because of their improved defense growth. Here is the list of items whose defense stats were lowered. And these are the heroes that got better defense growth. So it's a direct nerf for roamer fighters like Chou and Ruby because the items that they use will give lower stats. Moving on, we have the mana and energy adjustment. The developers noticed that some heroes were overly reliant on the purple buff. To fix this issue, they lowered the cost of skills on certain heroes. But in return, the purple buff will now give lower reduction costs on mana and energy. So basically, heroes won't be too reliant on the purple buff. Here are the heroes whose mana and energy cost are lowered. That Hylos adjustment is a big one because his second skill will now consume less HP. Now let's move on to the hero adjustments. The developer skilled the attack speed build on Ling with this attribute change. It means he now gets less attack speed stats from items and emblems. In return, he will have higher critical stats and improved damage. And his second skill will have a lower energy cost. There's also the new feature where using his second skill above a wall will not cost energy. So with the new Ling, you'll have to use burst build instead of attack speed. Next, we have Kagura's crush, Hayabusa. His ultimate no longer needs energy to cast. The first skill damage is now higher in the early game to improve his jungling. Another added feature is the ability to use retribution while in ultimate state. That means he now has a fighting chance in last hitting the Lord because of the immunity during his ultimate. Next is Alpha's rival, Saber. They lower the dash distance of his second skill, but in return, the enhanced basic attack will have a bigger range. Cooldown is also lowered to 7 seconds. Another buff is his ultimate range, where they increased it to 5.5 points. It's a good buff for Saber, giving him better mobility and range. Next is the adjustment on Jawhead. His passive stacks will now increase the amount of damage dealt, including his allies. That's 1% each, and it can reach up to 10% damage increase. Another adjustment is the shield from his second skill. It now has higher base stats but lower attack scaling. It means it will still give a decent shield even if you're using defense items. Overall, this is a good buff for Jawhead roamers. Next is the buff on Harith, where they shorten the animation of his first skill. This gives him a smoother transition over his next move. To balance, they slightly lower the skill's base and attack scaling damage. Another adjustment is the shield from his second skill. It will now generate before the dash, but they remove the feature where it increases based on the number of nearby enemy heroes. Moving on, we have Miya and Layla. Miya gets a longer basic attack range from 4.6 to 4.8. Meanwhile, Layla now has a faster backswing animation on her first skill. Based on the developers, this should improve her kiting ability. Next, we have the nerf on Karrie. Her second skill gets a longer cooldown in the late game, and her ultimate now has a lower attack and attack effects ratio in the late game, so lower damage and longer cooldown for our Karrie players. Next on our list is Natan. Ending his ultimate early will no longer refund its cooldown, but in return, the cooldown has been reduced dramatically. That's minus 10 seconds on all levels. Next is the buff on Julian's jungling ability. His passive will now activate after every skill casted. It means you'll get enhanced basic attacks even when you only use a single skill. To balance this new feature, they had to lower the attack scaling of his enhanced basic attacks. This enables him to activate the unique passive of Starlium Sight in between the skills of his combo. Next is the passive revamp on Lunox. The conversion ratio of her passive is lowered from 100 to 50%. It means she'll retain some magic penetration and spell vamp when switching modes. Previously, all stats were converted to the other side, but now there are some leftovers. Right here I'm on dark mode, but as you can see, I still have some spell vamp left. Another buff is the increased damage of her first skill in dark mode. They also added 30% movement speed when using her ultimate in light mode. Moving on, we have the buff on Eve. They remove the extra effects when hitting an enemy in the center of her first skill. To balance, they've increased his damage and lowered the cooldown. It's supposed to make her easier to play and also speed up her lane clearing. Next is the buff on Pharsa. Higher base damage on her second skill in the hopes of improving her lane clearing ability. That's a much needed buff, especially when she's compared to Vexana. Next is the buff on Alice. They increase her mana regen per second to 3%, but in return, they remove the feature where she gains double mana regen during battles. Overall, it's a strong buff on Alice because she'll have lesser downtimes. Next is Joy. Her ultimate will no longer give CC immunity. Instead, it will now grant slow immunity. The developer said she was too difficult to counter, and with this change, Joy players should be more cautious when entering a fight. To balance, her ultimate will no longer decay and its damage is also increased. So higher damage, but she lost her immunity. Next is Mathilda, where there's a new effect on her ultimate. Hitting an enemy hero during the second phase will reduce the skill cooldown by 40%. If you don't hit an enemy hero, no cooldown reduction will occur. In return, her ultimate gets a longer cooldown of 65 seconds. Maybe we can add fleeting time to make it even shorter, right? And they also nerfed her second skill shield with lower base points. Next is the buff on Lolita. Her passive shield will now give 1 stack each time she uses a skill. It's similar to Akai's, but on her part, she can apply the shield to allies. And the shield will now scale with magic power, which means the stats of Flask of the Oasis won't go to waste. There were some changes to the shield stack and interval, but it's still basically the same. Her second skill gets a shorter cooldown, but the shield base value is lowered. Overall, this is a good buff on Lolita's passive shield. Next is the nerf on Minotaur. His second skill is now lower, as well as the heal during his enraged state. The ultimate has a weaker slow effect, and there's now a warning feature on the last stomp. This indicator will give enemies a chance to escape. Next is the buff on Gloo. His first skill has a stronger heal effect, but the heal will only activate if it explodes on an enemy hero. And his ultimate damage will now have bonus damage based on Gloo's maximum HP. So higher HP will mean better heal and damage. Things are looking good for Gloo, right? Next is the buff on Chip. Passive heal is now stronger and his first skill gets higher damage. His special skill cooldown is now 20 seconds and it cannot decrease with cooldown reduction stats. Next is the damage adjustment on Masha. Her laning potential in the early game is now better, but in return, her late game damage is nerfed. They improved it by adding more base damage on her first and ultimate skill. But in exchange, the scaling of both skills are nerfed, which means weaker damage output in the late game. I haven't tested her out, so I'll just let our Masha players fight in the comment section. Is this a buff or a nerf? Moving on, we have the buff on Khaleed and Alucard. Khaleed's backswing animation is shortened, giving him a smoother transition to his next attack. Same for Alucard's ultimate. The first phase now has little delay, enabling him to chase enemies better with his enhanced basic attack. Next is the buff on Carmilla. Her ultimate will have a stronger slow effect from 15 to now 30%. I think it's time to revisit this forgotten support. Another hero is Edith, and they increase her defense to magic power conversion. But this is just a balancing adjustment because of the lower defense stats on items. Next we have Chou, and it's about his ultimate. The developers added a tap protection to minimize accidental taps when triggering the second phase of his ultimate. There's now a delay before you can use the second phase. Do you already know this, or are you too busy freestyling to notice? Next is the crab adjustment, where you no longer have to pick up the loots. It's now back to its old form, but with a better animation. Next are the item adjustments. Dominance Eyes will now activate when the enemy attacks you. Previously, you just have to be near them to apply its effect, but now it won't work. The enemy has to attack you first to apply its attack speed reduction and life bane effect. That means long-range heroes are no longer safe from its unique passive. Next, we have Blood Wings and Holy Crystal. Blood Wings magic power is now at 90 points, and the price is lowered to 2,100 gold. The shield effect is still there, as well as the movement boost. Holy Crystal, on the other hand, will get 185 magic power. The price is also increased to 3,000 gold. Basically, the two items, Blood Wings and Holy Crystal, swap prices and magic power stats. You might want to check your build and place Holy Crystal on the last part, because it's now a luxury item. Next is Endless Battle, where it now has a lower price of 2,330. Attack stats are also lower from 65 down to 60. Rose Gold meter price is reduced by 300 gold. That's a big one, right? Great Dragon Spear will get more movement boost from its unique passive, from 15 to now 30%. Special items like Forbidden Throw is now placed in the boot section. Next are the new talent effects. Brave Smite gets a stronger heal, but it can only activate if you hit an enemy hero. Killing Spree will now recover 15% of your lost HP. On the old version, it recovers 10% of your max HP. Last is the talent Weakness Finder. It now has weaker slow effect, but in exchange, the duration is now doubled. And that's it for this big official server update. Which heroes do you think will rise after this patch? Is it Gloo, Harith, or Ling? Share your thoughts in the comment section. That's all for this video. Stay safe and thank you for watching.